The Valliere Files. Episode 1. The Welcome. Cold Open. The body was found at dawn, precisely where the forest met the village. Not in the forest, that would be one thing. Not in the village, that would be another. But exactly at the boundary, as if someone had placed it there with deliberate care, or as if something had deposited it as a message. The girl was 17. Her name was Céline Moreau. She had been the prettiest girl in Sombremmont's lycée, which wasn't saying much in a village of barely 4,000, but still pretty enough that boys from the neighboring villages would sometimes drive over just to see her at the market. Now she lay on her back in the wet grass, her throat opened from ear to ear. Not cut. Torn. "Wolf," said Capitaine Marc Renaud, looking down at the body without much expression. He'd been the head of Sombremont's gendarmerie for 15 years. He'd seen things. "Wolves don't tear throats like that," said Dr. Amélie Rousseau, kneeling beside the corpse. She was the village doctor, which meant she also served as medical examiner when needed. Wrong angle. Wrong. Everything. "Then what do you call it?" Renaud asked. Amélie looked up at him. "I call it something we should send to Lyon for a proper autopsy. The family will want her buried quickly. The family will want answers. The family," Renaud said quietly, "will want this handled locally. The Moreaus are one of the old families. They understand how things work here." Amélie stood up, pulling off her gloves. "How things work here. Which means we'll rule it an animal attack. Tragic. Unfortunate. And we'll warn people to be careful near the forest until we can organize a hunt. There's no wolf pack in Midsommar. You know that. I know that. Everyone knows that." "Then," Renaud said, meeting her eyes, "we'll have to find one." Detective Inspector Élise Vallière arrived in Sombremont 3 hours later, driving a rented Citroën with Paris plates and a growing sense that she'd made a terrible mistake. The transfer had been presented as a promotion. Rural policing, her supervisor had said. Valuable experience. A chance to reset. Which was a polite way of saying, "We're sending you somewhere you can't cause more problems." The problem in Paris had involved a case. A missing girl. Evidence that led to a judge's son. A judge who happened to sit on the police judiciaire's oversight board. Élise had pursued the case anyway. Found the girl, alive, thank God, but traumatized. Arrested the judge's son. And then the case had evaporated. Evidence lost. Witnesses recanted. The girl's family convinced to accept a settlement. The judge's son walking free. Élise had protested loudly and officially. Had made it clear she believed in a cover-up. Had refused to drop it. So they'd promoted her to a village in the middle of nowhere and called it career development. Sombremont appeared through the morning mist like something from a fairy tale. Medieval stone buildings clustered around a church with a sharp steeple. Narrow streets paved with cobblestones. Window boxes with geraniums. A fountain in the central square with a statue of some forgotten saint. And behind it all, surrounding the village on 3 sides, the forest. Dense. Dark. Ancient. Midsommar, the forest of shadow mothers. Even the name was ominous. Élise parked near the gendarmerie, a small stone building that looked like it had been a tax collector's office in the 1700s, and sat in her car for a moment, collecting herself. She was 36. Divorced. No children. Her life was her work. And now her work was this. Small-town policing. Stolen bicycles. Drunk farmers. The occasional domestic dispute. She could survive this for a few years. Build a record of competence. Request transfer back to Lyon or Marseille. Rebuild her career. She got out of the car. Inside the gendarmerie, a man in his early 50s looked up from paperwork. Salt and pepper hair, weathered face, the kind of solid build that suggested he'd been athletic once and was now just sturdy. "Inspector Valliere," he said. It wasn't a question. "Capitaine Renaud," she replied. "Welcome to Sombremont." He didn't stand up. Didn't offer his hand. "I see you found us. GPS works even in the provinces." A slight smile. "Does it? I've heard GPS gets confused near the forest. Something about magnetic deposits in the rocks. Or poor satellite coverage." "That too." Renaud gestured to a chair. "Sit. We need to discuss your duties." "I read the briefing," Élise said, sitting. "Population under 4,000. Low crime rate. Primarily administrative work with occasional minor incidents." "The briefing," Renaud said, "was written for the regional office. Now let me tell you what you'll actually be doing." He pulled out a map of the village and surrounding area. The forest covered most of it, marked in dark green. "Sombremont is old," he said. "Older than most people realize. The village has been here in some form for over 800 years. The forest has been here longer, and they have an understanding. An understanding. The village doesn't bother the forest. The forest mostly doesn't bother the village. There are rules, traditions, things we do and don't do. You're going to need to learn them. With respect, Capitaine, I'm here to enforce the law, not local superstitions." Renaud looked at her steadily. "The law works differently in places like this. You'll understand eventually. Or you won't. Either way, you'll need to work with me, not against me." "I always work with my commanding officers," Élise said, "as long as they're enforcing the law." Something flickered in Renaud's eyes. Annoyance, respect, hard to tell. "We have an incident. A girl found dead this morning. I'm assigning it to you. Consider it your introduction to Sombremont." He handed her a thin file. Élise opened it. Crime scene photos. Harsh. Immediate. A teenage girl, throat destroyed, lying at the forest's edge. "Céline Moreau," Renaud said. 17. Student. Found by a farmer at dawn. Dr. Rousseau has done a preliminary examination. What's the ruling? Animal attack. Wolf. Tragic but straightforward. Élise looked at the photos more carefully. The wound on the girl's throat was savage, yes. But there was something odd about it. The edges were too irregular. The depth was inconsistent. And the angle. "I'd like to see the body," she said. "Of course. Dr. Rousseau is expecting you. Her clinic is on Rue de l'Église. And the crime scene? Already processed. But you can visit if you want. It's at the northern edge of the village. The old footpath that leads into the forest. I'll need to interview witnesses. The person who found her. Anyone who saw her yesterday. Inspector Moreau, Julian, my junior officer, can help you with that. But I'd appreciate it if you could wrap this up quickly. The family is anxious to bury her, and the longer we keep this open, the more talk there'll be." "Talk about what?" Renaud stood. "About the forest. About old stories. About things that rational people know aren't true but still find themselves thinking about at night. This village has seen enough tragedy. Let's not add to it with speculation and fear. Élise stood as well. I'll be thorough but efficient. That's all I can promise. That's all I ask. Renaud moved toward the door, then paused. One more thing. If you go into the forest, for any reason, don't go alone. And don't go at night. Local ordinance. Is that law or tradition? Here, Renaud said, they're often the same thing. Dr. Amélie Rousseau's clinic occupied the ground floor of a 3-story building near the church. The upper floors, Élise would later learn, were Amélie's apartment, bedroom, study, and what she called her stress relief wine cellar. Amélie herself was younger than Élise expected. Mid-30s, dark hair pulled back efficiently, the kind of sharp-eyed intelligence that suggested she'd chosen rural medicine by choice rather than necessity. "You must be the new detective," Amélie said, shaking Élise's hand. "I heard Paris sent us someone who actually solves crimes. Revolutionary concept. You don't like Capitaine Renaud? I like him fine. He's a good man. But he's been here too long. He solves problems the way the village wants them solved, not necessarily the way they should be solved." She led Élise through the clinic to a back room that served as a makeshift morgue. "I assume you're here about Céline Moreau." Renaud said animal attack. Renaud says a lot of things. Amélie uncovered the body. In proper lighting, the damage was even more striking. "Look at this." She pointed to the throat wound. If this were a wolf or even a large dog, you'd see specific tooth punctures. A pattern. Canine teeth here, molars here. But look, it's all wrong. It's like something grabbed her throat and just tore. With irregular force. Multiple angles. Could it be multiple animals? Attacking in perfect coordination? Unlikely. And there's no other damage. No defensive wounds on her hands. No signs of being dragged or mauled. Just this. Élise studied the body carefully. No sexual assault? None. No signs of struggle either, which is strange. It's like she stood still and let something tear her throat out. Drugs? Could she have been sedated? Toxicology will take weeks. But there's something else. Amélie turned the body slightly, exposing the girl's back. Look at her shoulders. See these marks. There were bruises. 4 on each side. Parallel. Like fingers. Someone held her, Élise said. From behind. Hands on her shoulders. Someone strong. The bruising goes deep. She was gripped so hard it fractured her collarbone. But here's the thing, the grip came first. Before the throat was torn. So someone held her still, from behind, while something else attacked from the front. Élise felt cold. This wasn't an animal attack. This was murder. Brutal, sadistic murder, staged to look like an accident. "Have you told Renaud this?" "I tried. He told me I was overthinking it. That local conditions, stress, fear, the forest's reputation, were making me see patterns that weren't there." "But you disagree." "I'm a doctor. I read bodies. And this body is telling me Céline Moreau was held down and murdered by at least 2 people. One to restrain, one to kill." Amélie covered the body again. "But Renaud doesn't want that answer. The village doesn't want that answer. It's easier to blame the forest." "Why?" "Because the forest can't be arrested, can't be tried, can't testify. If it's the forest's fault, it's just bad luck. Tragic but natural. But if it's murder..." She shook her head. "Then it's one of us. Someone in the village. And that means looking at our neighbors differently. That means admitting we're not safe. Élise pulled out her notebook. I need to know everything about Celine. Her friends, her schedule yesterday, anyone she might have been meeting. Can you help? I can do better. Amélie pulled out her phone. I took photos of everything, before Renaud could pressure me to file a simple report. Angles, measurements, close-ups of the wounds. And I kept tissue samples. Unofficially. Why? Because eventually someone would ask the right questions. I was hoping it would be you. The crime scene was exactly where Renaud had said, a footpath at the village's northern edge, where buildings ended and forest began. Someone had marked it with tape, but the locals had already started taking it down. Bad for tourism, someone explained when Élise asked. Tourism? In a village of 4,000 that was nowhere near anything. The ground was still damp from morning dew. Élise could see the depression where the body had lain, the trampling of grass where the initial responders had walked, the general mess of a crime scene that hadn't been properly secured. She stood at the forest edge and looked into the trees. Dense. Ancient. The canopy was so thick that even in afternoon sunlight, the forest interior was dark. There was a path, rough, barely marked, leading in. Footprints on it, some fresh. Inspecteur. She turned. A young man in gendarme uniform approached. Early 20s, eager expression, the kind of clean-shaven earnestness that suggested he'd joined the force because he believed in it. Inspector Julien Moreau, he said. The capitaine said you might need help with interviews. Moreau. Any relation to the victim? Distant cousin. This is a small village. Everyone's related to everyone somehow. He looked uncomfortable. I knew Celine. Not well, but enough to say hello. She was a good kid. Tell me about yesterday. Where was she? What was she doing? Julien pulled out a notebook. Élise approved of that immediately, and flipped through pages. She had school until 4. Then she worked at Café du Carrefour until 8. Her shift ended, she told Jean-Marc, that's the owner, that she was going home. Her house is on the eastern side of the village. This path isn't on her route. So why was she here? I don't know. I've asked around. No one saw her after she left the café. Boyfriend? Someone she might have been meeting. She was dating Thomas Laurent. He's 19, works at his father's garage. I talked to him this morning. He says they had plans to meet at 10, but she never showed. He called her around 10:30, no answer. Figured she'd fallen asleep. I need to talk to him. I can take you there now. Élise looked back at the forest. First, I need to understand something. Why would she come here? At night, alone, to the forest edge? Julien hesitated. There are stories. What kind of stories? About the forest. About les mères, the mothers. People say if you come to the forest at night and make an offering, you can ask for things. What kind of things? Help. Guidance. Sometimes. He looked embarrassed. Love. Girls especially. If they want someone to notice them, or if they want to know who they'll marry. They come to the forest edge, leave an offering, usually food or flowers, and ask the mothers. And people believe this? Old people. Superstitious people. But his tone suggested he wasn't entirely skeptical himself. Did Celine believe in this? I don't know. Maybe. She was dating Thomas, but there was talk that she wanted to break up with him. Maybe she was asking for guidance about that. Élise looked at the ground near where the body had been found. There, partially obscured by footprints but still visible, was a small pile of wildflowers, carefully arranged. An offering. She came here for the ritual, Élise said, which means she came voluntarily, which means someone knew she'd be here, someone who also knew the tradition. Half the village knows the tradition. Then we interview half the village. Thomas Laurent was a stocky young man with oil-stained hands and red eyes from crying. He worked in his father's garage on the southern edge of the village, and when Élise arrived with Julian, he was sitting on an overturned crate, staring at nothing. "Thomas," Julian said gently, "this is Inspector Valliere. She needs to ask you some questions." "I already told you everything," Thomas said. "I know. But Inspector Valliere is handling the investigation now. She needs to hear it from you directly." Élise sat on another crate, bringing herself to Thomas's eye level. "I'm sorry for your loss. I know this is difficult. But I need your help to understand what happened to Celine. The forest killed her. Everyone says so." "I don't believe everything everyone says," Élise replied. "Tell me about yesterday. When did you last see her?" "Around 6. I went to the cafe while she was working, had a coffee, talked to her for a bit. She seemed quiet." "Quiet how?" "Like something was bothering her. I asked, but she said it was nothing. School stress." "But you didn't believe her." Thomas looked up. "We'd been together 8 months. I could tell when something was wrong. But Celine was private about some things. She didn't like to share problems." "What time did you leave the cafe?" "Maybe 6:30. I had to help my dad close up the garage. We had plans to meet later, around 10, at the fountain in the square. It's where we usually met when I had late work." "And she didn't show?" "No. I waited until 10:30. Then I tried calling. No answer. I figured she'd fallen asleep or forgotten. We'd been fighting a bit lately, so—" He trailed off. "Fighting about what?" "Stupid stuff. I wanted her to come to Lyon with me next year. I got an apprenticeship at a better garage. But she wanted to stay here, go to university in Clermont-Ferrand so she could come home on weekends. I didn't understand why she was so attached to this place." "Did you know about the forest ritual?" "The offering." Thomas's expression darkened. "That superstitious bullshit?" "Yeah, I knew about it. Celine mentioned it once. I told her it was ridiculous." "Did she seem like she might do it anyway?" "Maybe. She was into that stuff. Old stories, folklore. Her grandmother used to tell her about Les Mares when she was little. I think part of her actually believed it." "One more question. Was there anyone else interested in Celine? Anyone who might have wanted to come between you two?" "Half the guys in the village wanted her. But she wasn't interested. She was loyal." His voice cracked. "She loved me. I know she did." Élise stood. "Thank you, Thomas. If you remember anything else, anything at all, please call the gendarmerie." Outside, walking back toward the village center, Julian said, "You think someone killed her because they wanted her?" "I think someone killed her, period. The why will become clear once we know the who." "You don't think it was the forest?" "I think," Élise said carefully, "that the forest makes a very convenient suspect, which makes it a very convenient cover for a human killer." They walked in silence for a while. Then Julian said, "You should talk to Père Guillaume, the priest. He knows things about the old traditions. Things the families don't share with outsiders. Would he talk to me? He talks to everyone. Says it's his calling. But whether he'll tell you anything useful? Julian shrugged. With Père Guillaume, you never know what you're going to get. L'église Saint-Sebastian dominated the village square, a medieval stone structure with a sharp steeple that could be seen from anywhere in Sombremont. Its bells had marked time for 800 years. Élise found Père Guillaume in the crypt, reading by candlelight. He was older than she expected, late 60s, white hair, wire-rimmed glasses, dressed in simple black with a priest's collar. He looked up as she descended the stairs. "Inspector Valliere," he said without surprise. "I wondered when you'd find me. You know who I am. In a village this small, everyone knows who you are by noon on your first day. Please, sit." He gestured to a stone bench. The crypt was cool, lined with ancient tombs bearing names worn smooth by time. "I'm investigating Céline Moreau's death," Élise said. "I was told you might have insights into the local traditions. The forest offerings. Ah, you want to know about Les Mares." Père Guillaume closed his book. Something in Latin, she noted. An interesting topic for a woman of science and law. "I'm interested in anything that might explain why Céline was at the forest edge at night. And you've been told she went to make an offering, to ask the mothers for guidance." He smiled slightly. "The Church officially frowns on such practices, of course. Pagan superstition. But the reality is more complicated." "How so?" "The forest was here long before Christianity. The people who lived here then had their own beliefs, their own gods. Or perhaps not gods, something else. Spirits, presences, the mothers." He gestured to the wall behind them. "Look." Élise turned. Carved into the stone were symbols she didn't recognize. Not Christian, not any known alphabet. Spirals and lines and shapes that hurt to look at directly. "The church was built on top of an older site," Père Guillaume explained. "The builders incorporated the existing stones, symbols and all. Either they didn't know what they were building on, or they thought the Christian foundation would sanctify the pagan ground. Perhaps it did. Perhaps it didn't. Do you believe in Les Mares?" "I believe in many things, Inspecteur. God, certainly. But also in older powers. The forest has been here for millennia. It's seen civilizations rise and fall. Is it so impossible that it might have awareness? Will? With respect, Father, I'm looking for human answers. And if the human answers and the forest are connected?" He stood, walked to a cabinet, pulled out an old ledger. "This is the church's record of deaths in Sombremont, kept continuously since 1247. Look at the patterns." He opened to a recent page. Élise saw names, dates, causes of death. Then Père Guillaume flipped back. Page after page. Year after year. "Notice anything?" he asked. Élise did. Every few years, sometimes every decade, sometimes longer, there was a cluster of deaths. Young people, mostly. Always near the forest. Always with causes that were vague. Accident. Misadventure. Animal attack. "It happens in cycles," Père Guillaume said. "The forest takes payment. That's what the old families believe. That the pact their ancestors made requires periodic sacrifice. That the mothers demand it. People don't sacrifice humans in modern France. Don't they? If the payment is taken, if someone dies near the forest under mysterious circumstances, and the village accepts it, moves on, doesn't investigate too deeply, isn't that a form of sacrifice? Passive, perhaps, but sacrifice nonetheless. Élise felt cold. Are you telling me the village lets people die? I'm telling you the village has survived for 800 years in the shadow of that forest. And sometimes, survival requires accommodation with powers we don't fully understand. That's not justice. No, Père Guillaume agreed. It's survival. Justice is a luxury for those not living next to something ancient and hungry. Élise stood. Thank you for your time, Father. You've given me a lot to think about. Inspecteur. His voice stopped her at the stairs. Be careful. You're asking questions that others have asked before. Some of them stopped asking. Some of them didn't stop willingly. Is that a threat? It's a warning. From someone who's been here long enough to see what happens to people who dig too deep into the forest's business. He looked at her with something like pity. You were sent here because you wouldn't let a case go in Paris, because you kept pushing even when told to stop. That determination is admirable. But here, it might get you killed. Part 2. The investigation deepens. Élise spent the afternoon interviewing villagers. Jean-Marc at Café du Carrefour confirmed that Céline had worked her shift and left around 8. She'd seemed distracted, he said. Kept looking at her phone. Did she receive any messages? Élise asked. I don't know. But she typed something. Then deleted it. Then typed again. Like she was arguing with someone over text. Jean-Marc was a heavy-set man in his 60s, with the easy manner of someone who'd heard every story in the village and knew which ones to repeat and which to keep to himself. He'd run the café for 30 years, inherited from his father, who'd inherited from his father. Did you know Céline well? Élise asked. As well as anyone. She worked here 3 evenings a week for 2 years. Good kid. Reliable. Polite. He wiped down the bar, though it was already clean. A nervous gesture. Everyone loved her. She was going to university next year. First in her family to go to university. Her grandmother was so proud. But she was troubled that night. Distracted, I'd say. Not troubled exactly. More like preoccupied. Like she had something important to do and was working up the courage to do it. Élise requested Céline's phone records. They'd take days to arrive. Small-town bureaucracy moved at its own pace. She spoke to Céline's friends from school. 3 girls, all visibly shaken by her death. They met at the church square, sitting on the fountain's edge, speaking in quiet voices that suggested they were still processing what had happened. They painted a picture of a girl caught between worlds, wanting to leave Sombremont but feeling obligated to stay. Her grandmother was elderly, needed care. Her parents had died in a car accident when she was 10. The grandmother had raised her. She felt guilty. One of the girls, Amélie, a different Amélie from the doctor, said, about wanting to leave. Her grandmother never said anything, but Céline knew. If she went to Lyon with Thomas, her grandmother would be alone. What about other family? Just distant cousins. No one who could take care of her grandmother the way Céline did. And the grandmother, several people mentioned, was one of the old families. A Moreau. One of the 12 who supposedly maintained the pact with the forest. Did Céline believe in the old traditions? Élise asked. The 3 girls exchanged glances. The kind of look that said, "How much do we tell the outsider?" She grew up with them, another girl said finally. Her grandmother told her stories. About the forest. About les mares. Most of us, we hear those stories and think they're just that, stories. But Céline, She trailed off. Celine what? She believed. Or at least, she took them seriously. She'd been going into the forest since she was a kid. Her grandmother taught her the paths, the safe places, the rules. What rules? Never go alone at night. Never take without offering. Never follow lights deeper in. Never break a branch without asking permission. That kind of thing. Did her grandmother teach her the offering ritual? The one where you ask les mares for guidance. Another exchange of looks. Yes, the first Amélie said quietly. Celine told me about it a few weeks ago. She said her grandmother was teaching her the old ways. How to be a mediator between the village and the forest. It was like a family duty, something the Moreaus have done for generations. And she was going to perform the ritual? She talked about it, said she needed clarity about her future, about Thomas, about university, about whether she should stay or go. Élise made careful notes. Did she mention when she was planning to do it? No, but she borrowed a book from me last week, about local folklore. She was reading about les mares, about what offerings they preferred, what times were auspicious. She was taking it very seriously. Do you still have the book? No. She kept it. Should be in her room, I guess. Élise added that to her list. Search Celine's room. See what she'd been reading, what she'd been planning. The Moreau house was on the village's eastern edge, a 3-story stone building that looked like it had been standing since the Middle Ages. Probably had been. Élise could see architectural elements from different centuries. The base was clearly medieval, the upper floor added in the 1700s, modern windows installed recently but sized to fit the old frames. An elderly woman answered the door. 80, perhaps 85. Straight-backed despite her age, with eyes that were still sharp. She wore black, full mourning, though the funeral hadn't happened yet. Madame Moreau, Élise said. I'm Detective Inspector Valliere. I'd like to ask you some questions about Celine. I've already spoken to Capitaine Renaud. I understand. But I'm conducting my own investigation. The old woman studied her for a long moment. You're the one from Paris. The one who wouldn't let go of that case. Who made enemies by pursuing justice when she was told to stop. News travels fast. In Sombremont, everything travels fast. We're a small village surrounded by an old forest. We have very little to talk about except each other. She stepped aside. Come in. We'll have tea. The interior of the house was exactly what Élise expected. Dark wood furniture, doilies, photographs spanning decades. Religious icons, Saint Sebastian, the Virgin Mary, various saints whose names Élise didn't know, mixed with something older. Dried herbs hanging from beams. Small carved figures on shelves that didn't look quite Christian. Bowls of salt in the corners. Rowan branches over doorways. They sat in a parlour that smelled of lavender and age. Madame Moreau poured tea from a porcelain pot with a steady hand that suggested she'd done this 10,000 times. You want to know about Celine, she said. What she was like. Why she might have gone to the forest. Whether I blame myself for her death. I'm not here to assign blame. I'm here to find out what happened. What happened, Madame Moreau said, is that a 17-year-old girl with her whole life ahead of her is dead. And I, who raised her, who loved her, who taught her everything I knew, failed to protect her. You didn't kill her. Didn't I? I taught her the old ways. I told her the forest could provide guidance. I gave her the tools to conduct the ritual. And then I let her go alone. For the first time, her voice cracked slightly. I should have gone with her, or forbidden her entirely. But I thought if she could connect with the forest on her own, if she could learn to be a proper mediator, then maybe the gift wouldn't die with me. Maybe it would continue through another generation. The gift, the ability to speak to the forest, to understand what it wants, to maintain the balance. She sipped her tea. Every old family has a role in the pact. The Laurents provide physical protection. The Fontaines maintain the sacred places. The Beaumonts keep the oral histories. And the Moreaus mediate. We stand between the village and the forest, interpreting needs, conducting rituals, ensuring the pact holds. What is the pact? Survival. That's all it's ever been. 800 years ago, the first families came to this valley, found it already inhabited, by the forest, by the things in the forest. They could have left, found easier land. But they stayed, and they made a bargain. The forest would allow them to live here, to take from its edges, to build their village. In exchange, the village would respect the forest, feed it, honor it, and when the forest required payment, provide it. Payment meaning what? Madame Moreau looked at her steadily. You know what it means. You've read the church records. You've seen the patterns. Every few years, the forest takes someone, usually young, usually at the edges, where the village and the wild meet, and the village lets it happen, because that's the price of living here. That's murder. That's survival. And there's a difference between murder and sacrifice, Inspector. Murder is taking a life for selfish reasons. Sacrifice is giving a life for the community's continuation. The law doesn't recognize that distinction. The law, Madame Moreau said, is only 300 years old. The forest is eternal. Which do you think has more weight here? Élise set down her teacup carefully. Did Céline go to make an offering? Yes. She asked me about the ritual 2 days before she died. About how it was done, what offerings were appropriate, what words to say. I told her everything I knew, and I gave her this. She pulled something from her pocket, a small carved figure, identical to the one Amélie had found in Céline's jacket. 3 women with joined hands. Les mères, Madame Moreau said. This has been in our family for 5 generations. You carry it when you go to the forest for ritual purposes. It marks you as a mediator, tells the forest you're there with purpose, not as prey. But Céline was killed. Yes. So either the carving doesn't work, or someone interfered with the ritual. Someone who didn't want Céline to receive the forest's guidance. Someone who wanted to use her for a different purpose. What purpose? The ritual Céline was performing was for clarity, personal guidance. A small thing. But there are other rituals. Larger ones. Rituals that require different kinds of offerings. You're talking about human sacrifice. I'm talking about maintaining the pact. Sometimes the forest's hunger is greater. Sometimes it requires more than flowers and wine. And when that time comes, the old families must decide, do we give the forest what it wants, or do we let it take what it needs? And you think someone used Céline for that? I think my granddaughter went to the forest for guidance, and someone turned her into an offering. Whether they did it to maintain the pact or to break it, I don't know. But I know this. She didn't die by accident. And she didn't die just because the forest was hungry. That evening, Élise checked into Hotel de Voyageurs, the only hotel in Sombremont. It was run by a woman named Madame Blanchett, who was somewhere between 60 and eternal. The hotel itself was a beautiful old building from the 1800s, all dark wood and brass fixtures and windows that looked out over the square. It had the feel of a place that had hosted travellers for generations, merchants, pilgrims, the occasional tourist who'd gotten lost on their way to somewhere more interesting. "Room 7, Madame Blanchett said, handing over a key. An actual metal key, not a card. "Top floor, corner room. You'll have a view of the forest." I didn't request a view of the forest. No one does. But everyone gets one anyway. This is Sombremont. The forest is omnipresent. She smiled, not unkindly, but with a knowledge that unsettled Élise. "How was your first day?" "Complicated. It will get more so. The forest doesn't like being investigated. The forest doesn't have preferences. It's trees. If you say so, Inspector." Madame Blanchett turned back to her ledger, an actual physical ledger, leather-bound, with entries going back decades. "Dinner is served until 9. I recommend the cassoulet. It's Philippe's specialty. After that, I suggest staying in your room. The village is safe during the day. At night." She shrugged. "Let's just say the rules are different after dark." "What rules?" "You'll learn. Everyone who stays here long enough learns. Some faster than others." She looked up, met Elise's eyes. "How long do you think you'll stay, Inspector?" "As long as it takes to do my job." "And what is your job, exactly? To solve crimes? To enforce the law? Or to understand why some laws don't apply here?" "The law applies everywhere." "Does it?" Madame Blanchett smiled again, that same unsettling knowing smile. "We'll see. Enjoy your stay, Inspector. And remember, after midnight, stay in your room. No matter what you hear outside." Élise went up to her room. It was small, clean, with that particular smell of old buildings, stone and wood and time layered upon time. The bed looked comfortable enough. The bathroom was modern, recently updated. But the window dominated the room. Large, old glass in wooden frames, looking out over the village square, the church, and beyond them, the forest. Mere's ombers. Even the name was ominous. Shadow Mothers. Élise could see it now in the fading light. Dense, dark, vast. It surrounded the village on 3 sides, a wall of ancient trees that seemed less like landscape and more like presence. She sat at the desk and opened her notebook. Wrote down everything she knew. Celine Moreau, 17. Found dead at forest edge, throat torn. Evidence suggests asterisk. She went voluntarily to perform offering ritual. She carried old family artifact, Les Mare's carving. She'd been deep in forest before, bark under nails, rare pollen. She was held from behind, bruises on shoulders. Something tore her throat with irregular force, not canine pattern. Village wants to rule animal attack. Old families involved in some way. Asterisk questions asterisk. Who held her? What killed her? Why was she targeted? Who knew she'd be at forest edge that night? What is the pact, really? Are the mothers real or metaphor? She stared at the last question. Was she really considering supernatural explanations? She'd been a detective for 12 years. She believed in evidence, not myths. But evidence could point to things you didn't expect. And myths often had roots in reality, even if the reality was distorted by centuries of retelling. Her phone buzzed. "Dr. Rousseau." "I finished the full examination," Amelie said. "You need to see this." "It's 8 p.m. "I know. Come anyway. Trust me, you'll want to see this before tomorrow. The clinic was dark except for the back room where Amelie worked. She looked exhausted, her hair falling out of its ponytail. I've been going over every inch of her, Amelie said, leading Élise to the body. And I found something I missed earlier. Look at her hands. She lifted Celine's right hand. Under the nails was a residue, dark, organic. I thought it was dirt at first, Amelie said. But I tested it. It's bark. Specifically, oak bark. And not from any oak around here. The cellular structure is wrong. It's ancient oak. The kind you only find in the deepest parts of Midsommar. She scratched someone, or something, or she grabbed onto something, a tree, maybe, while she was being attacked. Amelie pulled out a microscope slide. But there's more. Under magnification, I found traces of something else. Pollen. Very rare pollen. From a flower that only blooms in the forest once a year. When? Last week. Élise felt pieces clicking together. She'd been in the forest. Recently. Before the night she died. Not just at the edge. Deep in. Deep enough to find ancient oaks and rare flowers. Amelie pulled out her phone, showed Élise a photo. And I found this in her jacket pocket. The gendarmes didn't inventory it properly. It was a small carved figure. Wooden, very old, showing 3 women with their hands joined. Les mares. This isn't something you buy at the market, Amelie said. This is the real thing. Old family possession. The kind of thing that's been passed down for generations. Madame Moreau said Celine asked about the ritual 2 days ago, Élise said slowly. But based on this evidence, Celine had been going into the forest regularly. She'd been deep enough to find ancient trees. And she had an old family artifact, which means someone gave it to her. Someone from one of the 12 families. Or she took it. Either way, she was involved in something more than a simple offering ritual. Amelie looked at Celine's body with something like pity. I think she was meeting someone in the forest. Someone who gave her that carving. Someone who took her deep enough to find those ancient oaks. And then that someone killed her. Or someone else found out about the meetings and killed her for it. Élise photographed the carving, the bark residue, everything. I need to find out who this belonged to. Who would have access to an artifact like this? Good luck. The old families don't talk to outsiders about their private things. And this. Amelie touched the carved figure carefully. This is very private. The next morning, Élise went back to Père Guillaume. He looked at the photograph of the carving for a long time. This is dangerous, he said finally. Not the object itself, but what it represents. This belongs to the Moreau family. Specifically, it would have belonged to the eldest woman, Celine's grandmother. Could Celine have taken it? No. These are given, not taken. If Madame Moreau gave this to Celine, it means she was training her, preparing her to take over the family's role in maintaining the pact. What role? Père Guillaume was quiet. Each of the 12 families has a function. The Moreaus are mediators. They speak to the forest. When the pact requires maintenance, they're the ones who conduct the rituals. What kind of maintenance? The kind we don't speak of directly. He looked at Élise. But I'll tell you this. If Celine was being trained to be a mediator, and if she died the way she did, it means the ritual went wrong. Or someone interfered with it. Who would interfere? Someone who didn't want the pact maintained. Someone who wanted to break it. Or he hesitated. Someone from another old family who thought the Moreaus were doing it wrong. The families fight with each other? Constantly. They've been managing the forest for 800 years. That's a long time to maintain unity. There are factions. Disagreements about how much to give the forest, when to give it, what the rules really mean. So Celine might have been killed by another old family member? It's possible. If she was conducting a ritual, especially alone, especially unsupervised, and someone thought she was doing it incorrectly, they might have intervened. By murdering her? By offering her to the forest instead, making her part of the payment the pact requires. Élise felt sick. You're describing human sacrifice. I'm describing tradition. The difference is thinner than you'd like to believe. Élise spent the rest of the day tracking down members of the old families. Most wouldn't talk to her. The ones who did gave vague non-answers about tradition and privacy, and suggesting she focus on her real job, processing paperwork. But one person was more helpful. Julien, the young gendarme. "My family is one of the 12, he admitted over coffee at Café du Carrefour. "The Moreaus. We're the mediators. Or at least, we're supposed to be. My grandmother was training Celine because her own daughter, my aunt, refused the role. Went to Paris, never came back. So Celine was the next in line. Yes. And she took it seriously. She'd been going into the forest for months, learning the paths, the rules, the places where the mothers can be reached. Who else knew about this? Everyone in the old families. It's not a secret, exactly. Just not discussed with outsiders. Was anyone opposed to Celine taking the role? Julien hesitated. The Laurent family. Thomas's family. They're one of the 12 too. And there was talk that they thought the Moreaus were being too conservative, too cautious with the rituals. What does that mean? The pact requires offerings. But how much? How often? What kind? Those questions have different answers depending on who you ask. The Moreaus believe in minimal offerings, enough to maintain the pact but no more. The Laurents believe in being more generous. They think if you give the forest what it wants proactively, it won't take unexpected payments. Unexpected payments meaning people dying. Yes. So if Thomas's family thought Celine was going to continue her grandmother's conservative approach, they might have wanted to stop her. Julien looked miserable. I don't want to believe Thomas could do this. He loved her. Love and murder aren't mutually exclusive. Élise stood. I need to talk to Thomas again. And his father. Laurent's garage was closed when Élise arrived. The lights were off, the bay doors down. But she could hear movement inside. She knocked. No answer. Thomas? Monsieur Laurent? It's Inspecteur Valliere. I need to ask some questions. The movement stopped. Silence. Élise tried the side door. Unlocked. She pushed it open. I'm coming in. I'm armed and I'm police. Don't do anything. Something moved in the darkness. Fast. Before Élise could react, someone grabbed her arm, twisted. She dropped her weapon, felt herself being pushed against the wall. A man's voice, older, rough. You should have stayed in Paris. Another voice, younger. Papa, don't. Light flooded the garage as someone hit the switch. Élise blinked, vision adjusting. Two men. Thomas, looking terrified. And his father, mid-50s, solid, with the kind of strength that came from years of physical labor. And in his hand, a knife, old, ceremonial, with symbols carved into the blade. Monsieur Laurent, Élise said, keeping her voice steady, put down the knife. Whatever this is, we can talk about it. We tried talking, Laurent said. The Moreaus wouldn't listen. They're bleeding the forest dry with their minimal offerings, making it hungry, angry. If we don't give it what it needs, it takes what it wants. And it's always the young ones, always the ones with their whole lives ahead. So you killed Celine? I saved the village. His voice cracked. She was going to continue her grandmother's way, keep starving the forest. I couldn't let that happen. Papa, you said it was an accident, Thomas said, his voice hollow. You said she went to the forest and something happened. I lied. Laurent looked at his son, and there was anguish in his eyes. I'm sorry, but someone had to do it. Someone had to make the proper offering. You held her, Élise said, understanding, from behind, while something else, while I called the forest. Laurent's hands were shaking. I performed the ritual the right way, the old way, and the mothers came. They always come when the offering is willing and the ritual is correct. Celine wasn't willing. She came to the forest, didn't she? She brought flowers. She asked for guidance. The forest gave it. Through me. That's murder. That's tradition. That's survival. That's what this village has been doing for 800 years, and it's why we're still here while other villages died. Thomas was backing away, horror on his face. You killed her. You killed Celine. I saved you, Laurent said. You and everyone else in this village. The forest takes payment either way. Better one death we choose than many deaths the forest chooses. Élise saw her weapon on the floor, 5 feet away. Too far. Laurent was between her and it, and he had the knife. I'm taking you in, she said. Drop the knife. Come quietly. We can sort this out. Sort it out. Laurent laughed, a broken sound. You think your laws matter here? You think the gendarmerie can arrest me for maintaining a pact that predates the Republic? The old families will protect me. Renault will protect me. Because they know what happens if we stop feeding the forest. Capitaine Renault will uphold the law. Will he? Ask him about his wife. Ask him why she died in the forest. Ask him what he offered to bring her back. A sound behind them, the main bay door opening. Light flooded in. Renault stood there, weapon drawn. Laurent, he said, drop the knife. Mark, you understand. Tell her why this had to happen. Drop the knife. For a moment, Élise thought Laurent would fight. Saw him calculating, saw the desperation in his eyes. Then he looked at his son, who was staring at him with absolute horror, and something broke. The knife clattered to the floor. Renault moved in, cuffed him efficiently, professionally, read him his rights in a voice that was flat, controlled, betraying nothing. Only when Laurent was in the patrol car did Renault turn to Élise. You got your confession, he said. Are you satisfied? A girl is dead. Her killer is arrested. That's justice, not satisfaction. Justice. Renault looked toward the forest, dark in the afternoon shadow. We'll see. This isn't over. The trial will be complicated. The old families will make it complicated. Let them try. We have evidence. Confession. It's solid. In your world, maybe. Here. He shook his head. You still don't understand Sombremont. But you will. Eventually. Epilogue. The trial took 6 weeks to arrange. During that time, Élise learned that Renaud had been right. It was complicated. 3 of the old families testified on Laurent's behalf, claiming he'd been acting to preserve ancient rights. 2 testified against him, including Madame Moreau, who spoke in a voice like iron about her granddaughter's murder. The jury, brought in from Lyon, since no one in Sombremont could be impartial, deliberated for 3 days. Guilty. 20 years. The day after the verdict, Élise found an envelope under her hotel door. Inside was a single page, handwritten in elegant script. Asterisk, you solved your case. Congratulations. But justice in Sombremont is never simple. You've made enemies among the old families, and you've caught the forest's attention. Welcome to the village, detective. Your real education is just beginning. Asterisk. It was unsigned. But somehow, Élise knew it was from Madame Blanchett. That night, she stood at her window, looking out at the forest, and for just a moment, just a second, she thought she saw lights moving between the trees, deeper in than anyone should go, following paths that didn't exist on any map. She blinked. The lights were gone. But she'd seen them. She was certain she'd seen them. She opened her notebook to a fresh page and wrote, Asterisk case 001, Céline Moreau. Solved. But questions remain. Asterisk. Who were the mothers that Laurent claimed came? Why did Thomas's father believe so strongly in the pact? What happened to Renaud's wife? What are the lights in the forest? She looked at the list. All questions for another day. Another case. Because she understood now, her work in Sombremont wasn't just about solving crimes. It was about understanding the place where crime and myth overlapped, where human evil wore the mask of ancient tradition, where the forest waited, patient and hungry, for those who strayed too close to its secrets. End of Episode 1.